Chapter 1. Qualification for the Mythic Beta Test, Thian High City, Jia Min Apartment Complex. Room 1302, Unit 3, Building 1. After a long, exhausting day of work, Tran Huyen tossed his briefcase aside and collapsed onto the sofa, his body so worn out he didn't even want to move. Leaving early and returning late, working until he was spent yet unable to sell a single house. The life of a real estate agent was truly arduous. As if suddenly remembering something, Tran Huyen picked up his phone, tapped through several screens, and dialed a number. "Hello, Mom. I just transferred 3,000 to Dad's card. That's for both of your living expenses this month." "Oh, you silly child. Your father and I back in the village have nothing to spend money on. You're in the big city, where everything is expensive. You should keep it for yourself," Tran Mao said over the phone. "It's fine. I kept some for myself." "All right, then your father and I will put it away for you to use as capital to get a wife later. Try to find a daughter-in-law for me soon, okay?" After a bit more small talk, Tran Huyen hung up. The exhaustion on his face gave way to a fleeting moment of tenderness. In his past life, he had been an orphan and rarely felt the warmth of parental affection. He had transmigrated to Blue Star 3 years ago, and although he spent more time away from his parents than with them, he still felt their deep, abiding love. Because of this, since he started working, he regularly sent 3,000 yuan home every month without fail. Even when his salary was low, he preferred to suffer a bit himself to scrape the money together. Thinking of his mother's reminder, Tran Huyen broke into a bitter smile. With a monthly salary of 8,000 yuan, where am I supposed to find a wife? This world of Blue Star was not much different from his previous one, a fact that had caused Tran Huyen's dreams of being a literary copyist to go up in smoke. He had been forced to honestly return to his old profession. Fortunately, with some experience, he had managed to accumulate a bit of capital over the past 3 years. Ting! At that moment, a notification sound chimed. Tran Huyen picked up his phone to look and couldn't help but chuckle. These days, game developers really know how to use cheap gimmicks. The message read, "User ending in 688, congratulations. You have received the sole closed beta qualification before the Mythic Era descends upon Blue Star. For details, please click www. Tran Huyen usually ignored this kind of spam and intended to delete it immediately. Unexpectedly, the webpage opened automatically. Furthermore, his phone was now beyond his control. No matter how hard he mashed the screen, there was no response. "Damn it! Did I get a virus?" Tran Huyen's expression turned ugly. He frantically pressed the power button, intending to restart the device. Just then, a magnificent and grand piece of music erupted from the phone. Immediately after, Tran Huyen saw various exotic beasts and rare treasures appear on the screen. The imagery was so vivid and beautiful that he was momentarily stunned. "Welcome, beta player. Congratulations on activating your testing qualification. This game was formed naturally from the heavenly Tao consciousness of the Mythic Era. It is the only ray of hope for survival granted by the heavenly Tao to the living beings of a world about to be invaded. Please note, the Mythic Era will descend upon Blue Star in 1 week. Beta players have only 1 week to experience it. After 1 week, beta qualifications will be revoked, and the game will close completely. A player's character energy in the game will be 100% reflected onto their real-world body. Through the game, once a player unlocks a profession and cultivates it, they will receive a daily reflection equal to 10% of their highest base attribute value from the previous day. This reflection will directly affect the player in real life until 1 week later, when the Mythic Era officially descends and the full 100% reflection can be received. Notification continuously popped up on the screen, causing Tran Huyen's expression to shift repeatedly. Could this game be real? If it were anyone else, they might have thrown the phone away to prevent financial loss or the exposure of their browsing history. But Tran Huyen was inclined to believe it. After all, he was a transmigrator. If something as fantastical as transmigration could happen, then the descent of a Mythic Era didn't seem entirely impossible. As for this game, it was likely a cheat or benefit meant specifically for a transmigrator like him. With this thought, Tran Huyen's mindset stabilized significantly. He began to explore the game. At that same moment, he realized he could operate his phone normally again. The background of the game was roughly based on an invasion of exotic beasts. Humanity's situation was dire, but they could use awakening stones to awaken professions and cultivate abilities to fight back. There were thousands upon thousands of professions, divided into 3 main categories: combat, life, and support. Each category contained countless variations, and these professions were ranked from low to high: common, advanced, rare, legendary, and finally, mythic. Additionally, there were certain unique hidden professions. After a brief investigation, Tran Huyen realized his character had already been created at some point, using his real name and appearance. Tran Huyen checked the time. It was exactly 7 in the evening. Whether this game was real or not would likely be determined in a few hours. Following the prompts, Tran Huyen clicked on the profession draw wheel in the game, preparing to pull his first profession. There was a question mark above the wheel. Clicking it revealed a few notes. Only beta players can choose their profession through this wheel. In the real world, one can only awaken through an awakening stone. It cannot be chosen, nor can it be refused. Once a beta player draws a profession and links it, that profession will stay with the player for life. At that time, the profession draw wheel will close permanently. After reading the notes, Tran Huyen became much more cautious. The first draw was free. If he wanted to continue drawing after that, he would need to use mythic currency or purchase profession draw gift packs. Tran Huyen clicked the free draw. Since he hadn't linked a profession yet, he could theoretically draw until he was satisfied. This meant he had infinite choices. Congratulations, player. You have drawn a common profession. Farmer. Farmer, a life-type profession. Once activated, the user will have extremely high talent in cultivating agricultural products. No luck at all. The corner of Tran Huyen's mouth twitched as he returned to the main game interface. He might not be lucky, but he could pay his way through. He scrolled through the recharge shop. There were about a dozen types of gift packs related to profession draws, with prices ranging from 12, 30, 68, 98, 128, 328 to 648 yuan. Tran Huyen did a quick calculation. If he bought all these packs, he would have about 500 draws. Among them, the 128 Deluxe Pack, the 328 Distinguished Pack, and the 648 Imperial Pack also included profession experience pills, which could directly level up a profession upon use. Without hesitation, Tran Huyen bought 3 of the 12 yuan Extraordinary Packs, 3 of the 30 yuan Treasure Packs, and 3 of the 68 yuan Luxurious Packs, totaling 70 draws. Then, he began drawing professions without pause. 3 minutes passed, and Tran Huyen's face turned dark. Damn it, 70 draws and he had only hit 2 rare professions, and both were support types. Was his luck really this bad? Tran Huyen gritted his teeth and bought 3 more 128 yuan Deluxe Packs, giving him another 100 draws. This time, he didn't pull immediately. Instead, he solemnly went to wash his hands thoroughly before starting again. It wasn't until the 80th draw that he finally landed a legendary profession. But it was a life type. Tran Huyen was so frustrated he was trembling. Could the drop rate really be this low? It was like being cursed with bad luck. But just as Tran Huyen was about to give up hope, a different, even more heroic piece of music suddenly played. Within the game, a brilliant golden light erupted, and various wondrous visions appeared. Tran Huyen's entire body jolted, his eyes glued to the red-gold pillar of light on his phone. Chapter 2. Chaos Swordmaster. Congratulations to the player for drawing a mythical class. Heroic Spirit Summoner. Heroic Spirit Summoner. A combat-type class capable of summoning the spirits of deceased heroes to join the fray. For every 10 levels the class gains, the player can summon an additional heroic spirit. Tran Huyen stared at the introduction for the Heroic Spirit Summoner, his expression shifting rapidly. After a long moment, he gritted his teeth and pressed the draw button once more. There was no other reason than the fact that this was merely a mythical class. While mythical was the highest class tier and nearly impossible for an ordinary person to awaken, it was still a known possibility. As the only person on Earth with beta tester status, wouldn't it be far too mundane if he only bound himself to a standard mythical class? At the very least, it had to be a unique hidden class, and an exceptionally powerful one at that. Wasn't it just a matter of topping up? He could afford to pay. Tran Huyen's heart bled at the thought. If this mythical era turned out to be a hoax, there was a high probability he would be eating instant noodles for the rest of the month. Gritting his teeth, he decisively bought out every single gacha gift pack. Then, as if possessed, he began clicking the draw button frantically. Boom! At a certain moment, Tran Huyen's entire body tensed. He stared fixedly at the screen, which was now filled with brilliant, multicolored sword shadows. Congratulations to the player for drawing a hidden class. Chaos Swordmaster. Unique. Chaos Swordmaster. A combat-type class. Upon binding, you will receive the Chaos Sword Physique. Chaos Sword Physique. Experience points gained from killing monstrous beasts are increased by 200%. Capable of awakening Sword Dao skills of all elements. Sword Dao skill effectiveness is increased by 100%, and class talent effectiveness is increased by 100%. Upon binding, the class will be in its initial awakening state. In later stages, the player can hunt powerful beasts and use their blood essence to upgrade the Chaos Sword Physique. Tran Huyen's entire body relaxed, his face flushed with pure ecstasy. He didn't know if there were any hidden classes stronger than the Chaos Swordmaster. But personally, he was extremely satisfied with this one. Furthermore, he only had 10 draws remaining. He didn't believe that someone with his historically bad luck could pull a hidden class stronger than the Chaos Swordmaster in those last 10 turns. Bind class. Chaos Swordmaster. Respected beta tester Tran Huyen, congratulations on becoming a Chaos Swordmaster. You have obtained the Chaos Sword Physique and awakened a Space Element Sword skill. Skyvault Sword Slash. Note: for every 10 class levels, an additional element of Sword Dao skills will be awakened. Once the class level reaches level 50, class skills can be tempered through the Heavenly Dao Armory. Looking at the notification on his phone, the smile on Tran Huyen's face grew even brighter. To receive the powerful space element on his very first skill awakening. It seemed his bad luck had finally dissipated. Moreover, he could awaken a new elemental skill system every 10 levels. One had to realize that even mythical classes, during the basic 100 level phase, could at most awaken 5 to 7 class skills. Classes below the mythical tier had even fewer. Furthermore, other people's class skills were fundamentally tied to their specific element. For instance, a water-based class could never awaken a fire-based skill. He, however, could awaken all elements. This point alone placed him far beyond all other classes. Immediately afterward, Tran Huyen used all the class experience pills he had received from the purchased gift packs without hesitation. His level, which had been at level 1, instantly began to skyrocket. A moment later, Tran Huyen opened his class attribute panel. Name: Tran Huyen class. Chaos Swordmaster, unique level 45 strength, 1380 physique, includes defense, vitality, etc. 1840, 2760 equipment, none class skills, space element, Skyvault Sword Slash, ice element, miles of frozen desolation, lightning element, divine bolt sword, dark element, abyssal prison obliteration, class talent, locked, unlocks after the player reaches level 50. Note: the maximum strength, physique, and spirit attributes for an average person are 10 points. Staring at the attribute panel, Tran Huyen's eyes gleamed as he began to calculate. At level 1, his strength, physique, and spirit stats had been 6, 8, and 12, respectively. Based on his calculations, levels 1 through 10 added the base attributes cumulatively, taking 6, 8, and 12, and multiplying them by 10. From level 10 onward, the base attributes from the previous 10 levels were doubled before being added. For example, from level 11 to 20, the gains were 12, 16, and 24. From level 21 to 30, They became 24, 32, and 48. Following this pattern, the further he progressed, the more terrifying the attribute growth would become. What surprised and delighted Tran Huyen was that the 3 class skills he awakened afterward all belonged to exceptionally rare elements, rather than the common 5 elements. Just then, Tran Huyen's stomach began to protest. He glanced at the time. It was nearly 8 in the evening. He set his character to auto-farm a beast dungeon for experience, while he ran off to brew a bowl of instant noodles, devouring it hungrily. 20 minutes later, Tran Huyen sat on the sofa, staring past the game in restless anticipation. He had never felt time move so slowly. He wanted to know if, when the clock struck midnight, 1/10 of his in-game character's power would truly reflect onto his physical body. In the past hour or so, he had topped up several thousand yuan. As a salaried worker with a monthly income of about 8,000 yuan, this entertainment cost had already exceeded his limit. Thus, Tran Huyen didn't dare top up any further. If this turned out to be a scam and he kept pouring money in, his life would be ruined. The game was actually quite tedious, revolving mostly around grinding dungeons for levels. Since dungeon clearing could be handled by the character's autoplay, Tran Huyen didn't need to lift a finger. After waiting another half hour, he couldn't resist picking up his phone to scrutinize the game once more. Waiting was a form of torture. If he didn't find something to do, he truly wouldn't be able to stand it. But at this moment, besides the game, he didn't know what else to do. The class level system in the game, or rather, in the Mythical Era, was divided into 100 basic levels: King Realm, True King, Legendary Saint Venerate, and Mythic Monarch. Above Mythic Monarch, there was a rank called Starry Sky Emperor, though this level was displayed in gray, and its information was completely inaccessible. In addition, the gift packs in the game were countless and all-encompassing. Some of them were priced at amounts that far exceeded Tran Huyen's imagination. For instance, there was a Supreme Luxury Privilege gift pack that contained only one thing: an awakening stone that could manifest in reality ahead of time. Its price was a staggering 1 billion yuan. If the descent of the Mythical Era was real, this price was actually not high. It was arguably very low. To kill time, Tran Huyen clicked through the details of each gift pack one by one. Some of the contents made his eyes red with envy, but the prices made him hesitate. His entire hard-earned savings amounted to just over 100,000 yuan, which wasn't even enough for the spare change required by some of the packs. After browsing the store, Tran Huyen began looking at the monstrous beast encyclopedia. This book likely didn't include every beast in the Mythical Era, but it covered the majority. Among them were powerful creatures that reached the Mythic Monarch level, possessing incredibly bizarre abilities. Scanning through it, it felt like an expanded version of the classic of mountains and seas. Finally, after an agonizing wait, the clock finally reached the threshold of midnight. 23, 59, 56, 57. As the time shifted to 6 zeros, a gentle game notification chimed from Tran Huyen's phone. Respected beta tester Tran Huyen, congratulations on reaching level 47 on your first day. Your physical body is now preparing to receive the reflection of 1/10 of your base attributes. Chapter 3. Lam Dong, grinding through dungeons for several hours, had pushed his class level from 45 to 47. His basic attributes had also shifted: Strength 1572, Constitution 2096, and Spirit 3144. In other words, if his abilities could manifest in reality even at just 1/10 of their value, his personal attributes would skyrocket from his original Strength 6, Constitution 8, and Spirit 12 to Strength 57.2, Constitution 209.6, and Spirit 314.4. Considering that a normal person's attributes peaked at only 10 points, these stats were enough to elevate him into the realm of the superhuman, making him the strongest human on the current blue planet. Boom! The entire room suddenly erupted in a brilliant radiance. Golden motes of light coalesced in the air, transforming the space into a surreal, ethereal dreamscape. Before Tran Huyen's astonished eyes, Those points of light merged into a surging torrent that plunged directly into his body. In that moment, Tran Huyen felt a bliss so intense he nearly cried out. He could clearly feel every cell in his body brimming with vitality. A terrifying sense of power welled up within him. It felt as though he could shatter anything with a single strike. The process did not last long. About 3 minutes later, the room returned to its original silence. Tran Huyen raised his hands to examine them. His skin had become as fair and smooth as a babe's, yet his muscle groups, his abdominals, his biceps, were now clearly defined with perfect, sculpted lines. The sensation was miraculous. He knew he had become incredibly strong, but he lacked a concrete concept of just how strong he was. After a moment of thought, he stood up, went into the kitchen, and took a small knife to his palm. Clink! The blade failed to even scratch the surface, leaving behind nothing but a faint white streak. I've struck gold! I've struck gold! Tran Huyen could not suppress his excitement. He knew that from this second onward, his life would change completely. And perhaps the entire blue planet would turn a new page. To test further, he took a fruit knife and stabbed it forcefully toward his own body. Unsurprisingly, the blade bent instantly upon impact. If a constitution of 209 was already this terrifying, how powerful would he be if his full strength was realized? Tran Huyen's eyes burned with a fierce light. Next, the kitchen utensils became test subjects for his power. He crushed stainless steel pots into crumpled balls of metal without breaking a sweat. Only after testing for a long time did his agitated heart begin to settle. He picked up the last pot to boil some water, opened a pack of instant noodles, and added an egg. 5 minutes later, Tran Huyen picked up his chopstick and began to eat with a strange elegance. He slurped the noodles strand by strand, seemingly using the simple act to vent the excitement buried deep in his soul. After finishing his late-night snack, he showered and lay in bed, reflecting in silence. The mythological era would descend in 1 week. While it might be an opportunity for humanity to transcend and reach divinity, it would undoubtedly start as a colossal catastrophe. Caught off guard, even great powers armed with nuclear weapons would suffer devastating losses. Setting aside whether nuclear weapons could even destroy those mighty mythical beasts, the fallout alone was something no nation could easily bear. Though this world was a parallel dimension, the dragon kingdom he lived in still shared the Xianxia bloodline. If he were powerless, he would have no choice, but now that he possessed such ability, how could he stand by and watch Xianxia fall into ruin? Furthermore, with the support of the state, the growth he could achieve within this week would surely far exceed his imagination. Otherwise, relying on his own strength, even if he maxed out every possible loan, how much money could he realistically raise? A few million at most. Granted, a few million could still buy him extraordinary achievements, but it was incomparable to the sheer financial and resource-backed power of a nation. Even if he assumed the worst-case scenario, with his current strength, he could leisurely fight his way out of any encirclement. At the very least, he would have a clear conscience. In truth, Tran Huyen hoped for cooperation with the state. Once the mythological era arrived, the future global landscape would be completely upended. Though he held the initiative, he could not face the countless mythical beasts of the era alone. With a nation as his backbone, the benefits would far outweigh the risks. Lost in thought, Tran Huyen tried to close his eyes for a moment, only to find that sleep was impossible. His entire being was in a state of extreme hyper-arousal. Who needs sleep? Back to the grind. With a cold snort, Tran Huyen decided to forgo rest entirely. He picked up his phone and began grinding through dungeons, while simultaneously studying the data on mythical beasts and alias races recorded in the beta testing files. The next day, the sun hung high overhead. Tran Huyen, who had stayed up all night, frowned slightly. Too slow. A whole night of effort had only brought his class level to 49. Without spending money, he would be lucky to hit level 70 in a week at this rate. This was already thanks to the double experience bonus of the Chaos Swordmaster. Otherwise, the pace would be even more sluggish. After a moment of deliberation, he got out of bed, brushed his teeth, and prepared a simple breakfast. Once he finished eating, he opened his phone contacts, scrolled to the entry marked Sister Lam, and dialed without hesitation. Lam Dong, in her early 30s, was the director of the Thian High Municipal Government Office. She had been one of his clients. And rumor had it that there was an incredibly powerful influence standing behind her. This was why Tran Huyen chose to contact her. He intended to use the entity behind her to secure an audience with the highest levels of leadership. "Hello? Who is this?" A pleasant voice came through the phone. Tran Huyen smiled and replied, "Sister Lam, it's me, Tran Huyen, from the sales department of Longquoc Jia. Are you in your office right now? I have something extremely important to discuss with you." "All right, come over." In an office on the 3rd floor of the Tian Hai government building, Lam Dong hung up the phone. Her elegant brows furrowed slightly. She had an impression of Tran Huyen. She even held a bit of a favorable opinion of him, but if he thought he could use their minor acquaintance to ask for favors, he was sorely mistaken. Everyone knew that Lam Dong was impartial and strictly followed protocol. An hour later, Tran Huyen looked up at the solemn and dignified government building before stepping inside. "You said what?" A sharp exclamation erupted from the director's office, causing passing civil servants to glance toward the door. Inside, Lam Dong was glaring at Tran Huyen, her fists clenched tight. If she weren't trying to maintain a shred of patience, she would have called security to throw him out. The mythological era was invading in a week? He possessed internal beta testing status? It was the most ridiculous thing she had ever heard. Was this man incredibly bold or simply insane? To dare play a prank on a government official, and a director at that? Tran Huyen was not surprised by Lam Dong's reaction. Anyone hearing his words would have the same response, if not more violent. Most would have dismissed him as a lunatic and kicked him out immediately. "I can prove it." "Fine. Prove it." Lam Dong took a deep breath, crossed her arms, leaned back in her office chair, and stared at him coldly. Tran Huyen scanned the office, stood up from the chair opposite her, and walked over to a solid wood desk. He looked directly at Lam Dong and spoke calmly, "This is the power I have received." Crash. With those words, Tran Huyen slammed a palm down onto the wooden desk. In an instant, the entire desk spiderwebbed like a shattering mirror, disintegrating into small wooden shards that scattered across the floor. As if sensing this wasn't enough proof, Tran Huyen glanced at the other objects in the office and moved with a blur, striking out. Boom! Boom! In the span of a few breaths, the once solemn and grand office had been turned into something resembling a scrapyard. Basically, anything that could be broken, Tran Huyen had broken. If he weren't afraid of causing a massive structural tremor, he would have punched the wall as well. He understood perfectly well. Without a display of transcendent, superhuman ability, an official like Lam Dong would never risk her career to speak on his behalf. At this moment, Lam Dong's pupils contracted sharply. Her exquisite face was masked in utter horror. Coming from a family of high standing, she knew that in this modern world of technology, some forms of ancient martial arts still existed. She had even seen them with her own eyes. But those people, while possessing extraordinary skill and the ability to defeat a dozen unarmed men, could never reach the level Tran Huyen just demonstrated. What was truly terrifying was the speed he displayed. With her eyesight, she couldn't keep up at all. She only saw a series of residual images. Before she could even react, Tran Huyen had cleared out the room. This destructive force was simply too staggering. This office is too cramped to truly show off. The power I hold is far greater than this. Tran Huyen's words caused Lam Dong's chest to heave violently. The power he showed now was enough to shake the world, and that wasn't even the full extent of it. Wait, if Tran Huyen possessed such power, did that mean the invasion of the mythological era was also true? After regaining her composure, Lam Dong's face turned deathly serious. She looked at Tran Huyen and asked, "You want to cooperate with the nation? Though the time remaining is short, only a week, this is an absolute opportunity for our Dragon Kingdom. with the strength of the entire people. A week is enough to accomplish a great deal. Hearing this, Lam Dong frowned slightly, contemplating for a long time. Finally, she reached for the phone on her desk and dialed a specific number. Chapter 4. The Dragon Kingdom's Regard Little Dong. Why do you have the time to call your grandfather today? A warm, gentle voice emanated from Lam Dong's phone. Even standing several meters away, Tran Huyen could hear it clearly. He did not know who Lam Dong's grandfather was, but for a matter of this magnitude, the person she thought of first surely possessed an extraordinary background. Grandfather, I have something of vital importance to tell you. Have the technical staff encrypt our next call at the highest level. Lam Dong's expression tightened as she spoke with utmost gravity. I understand. After a brief response, Lam Dong's grandfather hung up. Ring, ring, ring. A few minutes later, the phone rang, and Lam Dong answered immediately. Speak. What is the matter? Grandfather, it's like this. In an ancient-style room within a grand compound in the imperial capital, an old man dressed in a Zhongshan suit, his hair and beard snowy white, listened to the voice on the other end. His pupils constricted and his chest heaved slightly. Even on the battlefields of old, he had never been so profoundly shaken. After retiring, he had cultivated a serene mind, keeping his emotions hidden. But at this moment, he truly could not maintain his composure. After a long silence, Lam Hung spoke into the phone. Little Dong, pass the phone to that young friend. I wish to speak with him. In the office, Lam Dong handed the phone to Tran Huyen, signaling for him to take the call. Greetings, sir. Young friend Tran, is everything you said the truth? It is absolutely true. Besides the changes in my own body, I have other ways to prove it. But I require the state's assistance. Other than Little Dong, have you told anyone else? No one yet. Good. Please wait in Little Dong's office. I will immediately dispatch men to fetch you. After hanging up, Lam Hung's expression was exceptionally solemn. In his 80 years of life, this was the first time he had heard of something so fantastical. Had it not been personally confirmed by his granddaughter, whom he trusted implicitly, he would have surely dismissed Tran Huyen as a fraud. But when the fate of the nation was at stake, even the slightest possibility could not be ignored. To do so would make him a criminal against the country. He picked up the landline in his study and called his assistant. Prepare the car to the Forbidden City. Meanwhile, back in the office, Tran Huyen handed the phone back to Lam Dong, secretly breathing a sigh of relief. He had finally established contact with the upper echelons. Everyone has selfish motives, and Tran Huyen was no exception. Cooperating with the state served the greater good and his own ends. After all, with the nation's backing, he could freely purchase the in-game gift packs to advance his strength. With such immense financial support, even in a short week, the heights he could reach would far exceed any imagination. Would you like something to drink? Lam Dong's beautiful eyes flickered with a strange light as she smiled softly at Tran Huyen. Once the state confirmed the truth, Tran Huyen's status would undoubtedly undergo a world-shaking transformation. From this moment on, he was no longer someone she could treat casually. Fortunately, she was the first to make contact with him. No matter how the future changed, she would not be left behind. She might even achieve greater glory because of it. Plain water is fine, Tran Huyen replied with a smile. He noticed the change in Lam Dong's attitude, but he didn't mind, for this was only a natural human reaction. While Lam Dong poured the water, Tran Huyen sat on the sofa and checked his phone, discovering that during this time, his profession level had reached level 50. Congratulations, player Tran Huyen. Your profession level has reached level 50. You are now a qualified chaos swordsman. The talent gacha has been unlocked for you. You may use this wheel to draw talents. Before the King Realm, your profession can fuse up to 5 talents. Once linked, the talent wheel will close. Please choose cautiously. Additionally, the profession skill cultivation feature has been unlocked, along with the Wutong Perilous Realm dungeon. Clearing the Wutong Perilous Realm will grant skill scrolls, used to cultivate profession skills. Of course, You may also directly purchase skill scroll gift packs from the shop. Looking at the notifications on the interface, Tran Huyen's eyes sparkled. He tapped on the game shop, and his face instantly darkened. Talent Draw Token Gift Pack. Basic. 20 tokens. Price. 200,000. Price. 680,000. Advanced 100 tokens. Price. 1,280,000. If this game hadn't been created by the Mythical Era, he would have definitely filed a complaint. What on earth was this? Were they insane for money? He had worked hard to save for years, yet he couldn't even afford a basic gift pack. It was one thing not to be able to afford a bathroom in the imperial capital, but he couldn't even afford a pack in a game. As for the skills scrolls, they were even more outrageous. The lowest tier white quality skill scroll pack cost 1 million. Tran Huyen didn't even bother clicking to see the higher tiers. Is this the beta game you mentioned? Lam Dong placed the glass of water on the table in front of Tran Huyen. She sat down beside him without hesitation, curiously observing the game interface on his phone. A crisp, clean fragrance wafted into his nose, making Tran Huyen subconsciously touch his nose. He smiled and replied, "Yes, a woman in her 30s is at her most radiant. With Lam Dong's exquisite features and perfect figure, no man could remain indifferent, and Tran Huyen was no exception." Of course, that stir of emotion lasted only a moment. With his current spirit stat of over 300 points, he could maintain perfect self-control. If the Mythical Era truly descends, these prices aren't considered expensive. They're actually far too cheap. Lam Dong glanced at the prices in the shop and spoke softly. Despite his tight budget, Tran Huyen had to admit she was right. Compared to the Mythical Era, these prices were indeed as cheap as they could get. Now that he had the state's backing, what use did he have for the few $100,000 in his savings account? It was completely unnecessary. Knock, knock. Just as Lam Dong was about to say more, a knock sounded at the door. "Come in." As soon as she spoke, the office door was pushed open. A dozen imposing soldiers in military uniforms marched in. They stopped before Tran Huyen and gave a crisp military salute. "Mr. Tran, please come with us. Director Lam, please come along as well." "Sorry for the trouble." Tran Huyen stood up, returned the salute, and walked out. Lam Dong and the dozen soldiers followed closely behind him. Stepping into the hallway, Tran Huyen discovered over 20 more soldiers standing guard, each armed to the teeth. The civil servants of the Xianxia municipal government, who usually worked there, had all been evacuated. He had thought this was already a massive display. But once they reached the front of the government building, Tran Huyen realized he had still underestimated the state's regard for this matter. With his heightened senses, he perceived that the entire government building had essentially been cordoned off by the military. Some were hidden in the shadows, while others stood guard to prevent any prying eyes from other staff members. A total of 7 bulletproof armored vehicles were parked neatly in front of the building. It made sense. Facing an unprecedented shift in history, how could the nation not treat it with the utmost gravity? After Tran Huyen took his seat inside, the armored convoy slowly pulled away from the government building. Chapter 5. Non-Human. It was a long while before the civil servants stepped out of their offices, peering curiously through the windows at the convoy, their voices rising in a constant hum of speculation. Many among them were witnessing such a grand spectacle for the first time, and they were chilled to the bone. Some even whispered rumors, wondering if a high-ranking figure had just been arrested for a major crime. Yet, even for a fallen titan, would it truly necessitate a military mobilization of this scale? Regardless of their conjectures, none could have ever guessed the true reality behind the event. Inside the bulletproof vehicle, no one spoke. The atmosphere was heavy and solemn. Tran Huyen gazed at the bustling traffic outside the window, a silent sigh escaping his heart. Despite having the support of the state and possessing the status of a beta tester, he still lacked the confidence to face the impending mythological era. No one knew what the situation would truly be like then, or how formidable the exotic beasts of that era would become. Time was far too short. Even with the nation's full strength, It would be difficult to safeguard the entire territory. When the time came, how catastrophic would the disaster be? From the moment he stepped into the car, Tran Huyen had been contemplating how to help the Dragon Kingdom defend itself against the approaching mythological era. How could he leverage his early access advantage to create opportunities for the nation? His thoughts flickered in fragments throughout the journey. Who could have imagined that not long ago he was a mere real estate salesman, and now he was weighing the grand affairs of the state? Destiny was indeed a wonder. "Mr. Tran, we have arrived." The soldier, acting as the temporary driver, called out softly to Tran Huyen. Tran Huyen looked out the window and realized they had arrived at a military base without him noticing. Not far from the convoy, a line of stalwart soldiers stood in perfect, rigid formation. At the front stood a burly, middle-aged man in a dark green military uniform, a single star of a general resting on his shoulder. Leading several colonels, he strode toward Tran Huyen's bulletproof car. As Tran Huyen stepped out and found his footing, the men reached him and offered a sharp military salute. Not daring to delay, Tran Huyen quickly returned a standard military salute. "Mr. Tran, I am the commander of the Dongfeng base, Lam Keen Yip." "Greetings, Commander Lam. I am Tran Huyen." Tran Huyen noticed that while he was speaking with Lam Kien Yip, Lam Dong, who stood nearby, hesitated. She seemed to want to say something to Lam Kien Yip, but perhaps due to the formal setting, she refrained from speaking. "Lam Kien Yip? Lam Dong? Could this be my future father-in-law? Bah, what am I thinking?" Under Lam Kien Yip's lead, the group moved toward the central building. A major stayed behind, looking at the soldiers who had escorted Tran Huyen. In a low, stern voice, he commanded, "From this moment on, forget everything you have just done. Furthermore, everyone is to report to the main hall to sign a confidentiality agreement." "Yes, sir." "Mr. Tran, we need your cooperation for a few tests. Would that be convenient for you?" Hearing Lam Kien Yip's request, Tran Huyen nodded. "Of course. Thank you for your cooperation, Mr. Tran." With that, Lam Kien Yip led Tran Huyen to an elevator. Following them inside, aside from Lam Dong, were only 3 colonels. The other officers remained outside. Tran Huyen noticed the elevator was descending. It appeared that the subterranean section was the true heart of the Dongfeng base. After a series of tedious verification procedures, the group arrived at a vast hall equipped with various measuring devices and manned by over a dozen researchers. "Mr. Tran, this is Academician Deep Thin of the Dragon Kingdom Academy of Sciences. He will be in charge of your testing." After a few pleasantries, Deep Thin, clad in a white lab coat, pointed toward a stainless steel mannequin not far away. "Mr. Tran, please exert your full strength and strike that figure." Tran Huyen nodded and walked straight toward the steel mannequin. At that moment, everyone present held their breath, their eyes fixed on Tran Huyen. Even the high-ranking leaders of the Dragon Kingdom, observing via real-time camera feeds at the Forbidden City in the imperial capital, fell silent, their gazes glued to the screens. Boom, a thunderous roar erupted. When everyone regained their focus, they saw that the steel mannequin had been sent flying, smashing into a specially reinforced wall and leaving a deep indentation. The mannequin itself had been reduced to a pile of scrap, its chest cavity pierced through. This sight left Lam Kien Yip, Lam Dong, Deep Thin, and the others gasping in shock. Only now did Lam Dong realize just how much restraint Tran Huyen had used when he punched a hole through her desk earlier. "What is the data?" Deep Thin snapped back to his senses and hurriedly questioned his assistant. "Base power exceeds 4,000 kilograms. That single sentence plunged the room into silence. The thought non-human simultaneously crossed everyone's mind. Those present were individuals of extraordinary status. They knew of the existence of ancient martial arts, but to their knowledge, even the top-tier ancient martial artists could never exceed a base power of 2,000 kilograms. Reality was not a martial arts film. An artist reaching 1,000 kilograms was already exceedingly rare, each one meticulously documented by the state. Continue the testing. It was only an hour later that Tran Huyen was led into an office by Lam Keen heaped to rest. There was no doubt that everyone involved in the testing had been shocked to the point of numbness by the abilities Tran Huyen had displayed. In the office, only Tran Huyen and Lam Keen Hiep remained. The commander picked up an encrypted laptop and placed it before Tran Huyen. "Mr. Tran, the leaders wish to speak with you." Hearing this, Tran Huyen's expression turned solemn as he straightened his attire. The video call connected. On the screen, several elderly men sat in a room designed in an ancient style. Seeing this, Tran Huyen immediately stood up and delivered a military salute. "Greetings, leaders. Greetings, Comrade Tran Huyen." The gentle voices of the leaders drifted from the speakers. One of them smiled and said, "Comrade Tran Huyen, please, sit down. Would you be so kind as to explain the situation in detail?" After sitting, Tran Huyen clenched his hands beneath the table to ease his nerves. He looked at the screen and began to recount the story slowly. "You mean to say the strength you currently possess is only 1/10 of that profession's base attributes?" A moment later, gasps of astonishment broke out. Even Lam Keen Yep, standing to the side, felt his pupils contract. They had seen with their own eyes how terrifying Tran Huyen's current strength was. To think that such power was merely 1/10 of the base stats? That is correct. During this 1 week, I will receive 1/10 of the attribute values adjusted from the previous day's character progression every day. Upon hearing this, the leaders' expressions became exceptionally grave. One leader asked it again. "Comrade Tran Huyen, we heard you have another way to prove the validity of this event?" Truthfully, the power Tran Huyen had displayed already inclined the leaders to believe him. However, because it concerned the destiny of the entire nation, they had to be extremely cautious. In other words, they needed more persuasive evidence before they could make a final resolution. For once they committed, the entire nation would undergo earth-shattering changes within the next few days. The financial resources required and the losses to be sustained would be immeasurable. In the games mall, there are certain treasure gift packs that can be materialized into reality ahead of time. It is just that, the money. Tran Huyen scratched his head, offering a sheepish, awkward smile. Chapter 6. The Bureau of Mythic Anomalies, haha. Seeing Tran Huyen's earnest demeanor, the various high-ranking officials chuckled, and the tense, solemn atmosphere seemed to dissipate somewhat. Kien Hiep, young comrade Tran Huyen, has placed his trust in the nation. The nation naturally cannot let him down. Understood, sir. Upon hearing this, Tran Huyen hurriedly added, 5 million is enough. Lam Kien Hiep nodded slightly, and picked up his phone to make a call, without even asking for Tran Huyen's bank account number. Tran Huyen understood clearly that before the state had brought him here, every bit of his information had likely been thoroughly investigated. The current Lam Kien Hiep probably knew him better than he knew himself. Not long after, 5 million was transferred into Tran Huyen's account. He did not hesitate. Right before everyone's eyes, he took out his phone and purchased the game gift pack he had selected earlier. About 10 minutes later, the void in front of Tran Huyen suddenly twisted and rippled like water. Immediately afterward, an exquisite blade, engraved with intricate patterns, pierced through the void, appearing right there in the office. The sight caused Lam Kien Hiep's pupils to contract, his entire body tensing instinctively. At this distance, if Tran Huyen were to use that weapon against him, he wouldn't even have time to cry for help before losing his life. In contrast to Lam Kien Hiep's vigilance, the high-ranking officials were more astonished by the sword that had manifested out of thin air. This is equipment for a class user in the game. According to the classification, this is a spirit-rank divine weapon intended for class users between levels 51 and 70. It is incredibly sharp. Standard bulletproof vests certainly wouldn't withstand a single strike. Since Tran Huyen had never used this type of spirit-rank divine weapon before, he didn't dare to be too absolute in his claims. We must ask young comrade Tran Huyen to wait a moment. The few of us need to deliberate, one of the leaders said after a pause. To them, no matter how sharp that sword was, it was far less significant than the method by which it appeared. That alone was enough for them to commit to believing Tran Huyen's words. Therefore, what they needed to focus on most now was the imminent arrival of the Mythic Era. Tran Huyen nodded slightly, stood tall, and gave a military salute to the leaders. The call was temporarily disconnected, and Tran Huyen relaxed significantly. Although he had reached a superhuman realm, he still felt immense pressure facing those elders. Inside the office, neither Tran Huyen nor Lam Qianyip spoke, waiting in silence. Taking advantage of the time, Tran Huyen pulled out his phone and tapped into the game interface. Before arriving at the Dongfeng base, Tran Huyen had directed his character into the Wutong Perilous Realm Trial Dungeon. In this short time, his class user level had already risen to level 52, even though barely over an hour had passed. It appeared that the Wutong Perilous Realm provided far more experience than ordinary dungeons. He wondered what form the game's dungeons and perilous realms would take in reality once the Mythic Era descended. Half an hour later, the video call reconnected. The expressions of the officials were grave. One leader stared intently at Tran Huyen and said in a heavy voice, "Comrade Tran Huyen, the state has decided to establish the Bureau of Mythic Anomalies, directly subordinate to the cabinet of the Long State. You shall serve as the director, and Comrade Lam Qianyip shall serve as the deputy director. The headquarters of the Bureau of Mythic Anomalies will be temporarily located at the Dongfeng base. Within the coming week, everything must give way to the Bureau of Mythic Anomalies. After discussing with Comrade Lam Qianyip, you are to submit a response plan for the descent of the Mythic Era. Furthermore, we are issuing the first directive of the Bureau of Mythic Anomalies. Over the next week, the Bureau's primary goal is to help you raise your class user level in the game to the absolute maximum. All necessary funds will be provided by the National Treasury." Hearing the words coming from the computer, Tran Huyen was stunned. He never expected to suddenly shoulder such a massive responsibility. Anyone in his shoes would be reeling. He had only intended to ask the state for investment to cultivate his own class user status and, in passing, inform them of the Mythic Era's arrival. How had he suddenly become the director of the Bureau of Mythic Anomalies? Whether in his past life or after transmigrating, he was just an ordinary citizen of the Long State. If he hadn't possessed the internal beta tester status, he wouldn't have been qualified to set foot in this base in his entire life. Comrade Tran Huyen, there is no need for self-doubt. The fact that you receive the only beta tester status on this planet proves that you are no ordinary person. The nation believes in you, and you must believe in yourself. Those two sentences sent a shiver through Tran Huyen, and a surge of intense passion suddenly welled up within him. "Understood, sir. Tran Huyen will certainly do everything in his power to assist the Long State." Under the gentle gaze of the leaders, the video call slowly ended. Lam Qianyip quickly stepped into his new role and asked Tran Huyen directly, "Director, do you have a plan in mind yet?" Time waited for no one. They had to seize every second and minute, without the slightest negligence. Hearing this, Tran Huyen pondered for a long time, organizing the scattered thoughts he had gathered along the way before speaking slowly. "From what I know, after the Mythic Era descends, there will initially be an invasion of exotic beasts. But as long as we withstand the initial chaos, we will gain a brief window for development. Additionally, after the descent, the spiritual energy from the mythic world will flood into Earth on a massive scale, which will also trigger a global spiritual recovery. Stimulated by this energy, the flora and fauna of Earth are likely to undergo mutations." Lam Qianyip's brow furrowed tightly. The situation was even more severe than he had imagined. According to Tran Huyen, the Long State not only had to defend against beasts from the Mythic Era, but also guard against mutated plants and animals right here on Earth. "I've been thinking about this on the way here, and have outlined a few preliminary plans. Commander Lam, would you help me review them?" Tran Huyen looked at Lam Qianyip and said softly, "Please, Director, go ahead." Lam Qianyip sat upright, listening intently. At this point, No one understood the Mythic Era better than Tran Huyen. His plan would, to a large extent, dictate the direction of the Bureau of Mythic Anomalies for the next week. First, large-scale conscription. Resisting the descent of the Mythic Era is certainly not a short-term war. Our long state needs an abundant and continuous supply of soldiers. Second, recall overseas citizens. 2 days before the Mythic Era descends, the long state will close its borders. Third, using provincial capitals as focal points. A model of small cities surrounding large ones. Establish 34 defense zones across the long state. We must strive to relocate all residents from remote mountainous areas into these zones. Each zone is projected to station 200,000 troops. Simultaneously, establish energy detection centers in these areas to maximize our ability to observe where exotic beasts appear. Fourth, starting now, gather the top scientists and devote all resources to researching and manufacturing high-lethality weaponry. Fifth, after the Mythic Era descends, the domestic population may fall into a state of panic. We need to go to great lengths to provide comfort and guide public opinion. That is all I have thought of for now. Commander Lam, you can gather the relevant experts to refine and supplement this. If you have any differing opinions, please speak plainly. As Tran Huyen finished speaking, a look of astonishment appeared on Lam Kian Heap's face. That Tran Huyen could devise such a detailed plan in such a short time, though there were some gaps, was truly extraordinary. After all, before this, Tran Huyen had been just an ordinary man. The director's plan is enough to keep our bureau very busy. I will summon the relevant personnel for discussion and quickly submit a detailed draft to you. Having said that, Lam Kian Heap seemed to remember something and asked, Director, how much money do you need to use right now? I will report it immediately so they can transfer it to your card. Chapter 7. Top up 10 billion. Top up 10 billion first. Tran Huyen did not stand on ceremony. He spoke directly. With the nation as his benefactor, he had to broaden his horizons. This 10 billion was merely the beginning. Lam Kian Heap nodded slightly. Right in front of Tran Huyen, he picked up the phone and made the call. About 10 minutes later, looking at the long string of zeros displayed on his banking app, Tran Huyen's heart couldn't help but pound. Tran Huyen, oh Tran Huyen, you have to stay calm. It's only 10 billion. Stop your legs from shaking. Director, is this office suitable for your temporary use? Hearing Lam Kian Heap's voice, Tran Huyen snapped back to reality and gave a slight nod. Then please take a moment to rest. I will go summon the experts to discuss the plans immediately. With that, Lam Kian Heap gave Tran Huyen a military salute before turning to leave. Though he was a brigadier general, Tran Huyen's current position and importance far exceeded his own. As the only person capable of awakening a profession and cultivating ahead of time, Tran Huyen would undoubtedly be the leading figure for Long Kingdom in the fight against monstrous beasts once the age of mythology invaded in the future. After Lam Kian Heap left, Tran Huyen pulled out his phone and began a frantic shopping spree. He looked at the prices of the gift packs in the game store and smiled faintly. In the past, I looked upon you as a towering mountain. Today, you are to me but a lowly hill. Talent draw packs, purchase. Skill scroll packs, purchase. After buying the talent draw packs, Tran Huyen began the gacha without hesitation. Heroic music swelled as exquisite dreamlike images flashed across the screen. He didn't even spare a glance for low-level talents. If it wasn't at least legendary grade, it wasn't worth his time. After exactly 100 draws, Tran Huyen's eyes suddenly lit up, staring intently at the mythic grade talent that had just appeared on the interface. Sword Heart Clarity, a top-tier mythic grade talent of the Way of the Sword. It grants the ability to comprehend all profound truths of swordsmanship, foresee crises related to oneself, and provides an immense boost to both sword comprehension and the power of sword skills. After thoroughly researching Sword Heart Clarity, Tran Huyen chose to bind it without hesitation and continued his talent draws. After half an hour, Tran Huyen beamed with joy as he looked at the 5 top-tier mythic talents displayed on his profession attribute panel. Chaotic Sword Domain, a top-tier domain-type talent. It can merge the player's various sword systems to form a unique domain. Note: a domain is a prerequisite for breaking through to the level 100 King Realm. It must be comprehended personally and cannot be breached using experience pills. If the player has not comprehended it, they will be unable to enter the King Realm. Emperor Dragon Tyrant Body, a top-tier constitution-type talent. It allows the user to strengthen themselves by devouring the blood and essence of monstrous beasts. Upon reaching perfect refinement, one can achieve physical sanctity. Crimson Flame Furnace, a top-tier skill-type talent. When cast, it can convert monstrous beasts, refining them into life crystals. Life crystals contain a massive source of power. Upon consumption, they can upgrade the strength of oneself or others. The higher the quality of the refined beast, the higher the quality of the life crystal. Imperial Path Nirvana, a top-tier passive life-type talent. When the linked person faces a life or death crisis, Nirvana is triggered. Note: Nirvana has a certain failure rate. Upon success, one will undergo a complete transformation, far surpassing their previous self. With these 5 major talents, Tran Huyen had nearly become a perfect warrior without any weaknesses. For offense, he had the chaotic sword domain. For defense, the Emperor Dragon Tyrant Body. And for surviving a crisis, there was the Imperial Path Nirvana. With an entire nation backing him, how could he possibly lose? It was a pity that these 5 talents were currently in their elementary stages. To upgrade them, he had to train and comprehend them himself. He could not exploit the game to raise them instantly. Otherwise, Tran Huyen would have surely maxed out all 5 immediately. After linking the 5 talents, Tran Huyen continued his shopping frenzy, clearing out all profession skill scroll packs to upgrade his primary skills. Beyond quality, profession skills also had realm levels. Mortal grade, levels 130. Profound grade, levels 3150. Spirit grade, levels 5170. And Earth grade, levels 71-100. The profession skills initially awakened, even those of mythic quality, were only at mortal grade. Upgrading them usually required one's own comprehension to raise them bit by bit. Of course, a pay-to-win player like Tran Huyen was an exception. Through the skill scrolls he purchased, Tran Huyen directly raised all 5 of his profession skills to the spirit grade. In addition to the 4 skills he had awakened earlier, upon reaching level 50, Tran Huyen had also awakened another profession skill, Universal Radiance, a light-type skill. With all that finished, Tran Huyen set his character to sweep the Wutong Perilous Realm dungeon, while he continued to browse the game store. Unfortunately, experience pill packs had a daily purchase limit. Once exhausted, he had to wait for the next day's refresh. Otherwise, Tran Huyen would have certainly ground his level straight to 100 before doing anything else. Once mythology descended, no matter how strong Tran Huyen was, he couldn't personally look after the entire Long Kingdom. Therefore, the awakening stones in the store that could be manifested into reality were absolute must-buys. He glanced through them. There were 3 packs in total, each containing 1 awakening stone, followed by a note. These awakening stones are restricted items. Each stone can only help 100 people awaken a profession. Tran Huyen's face darkened as he cursed inwardly, then continued scrolling. If it was just a simple profession awakening, the help would be limited. After all, a level 1 professional might be stronger than an ordinary person, but they were still as fragile as ants before a monstrous beast. While Tran Huyen was browsing the game store, the entire Dongfang base began to mobilize. Security levels were raised several notches higher than before. In the shortest time possible, Lam Qian summoned many research experts to discuss the plans Tran Huyen had listed. After refining and perfecting them, Lam Qian, with his swift and decisive style, brought the documents directly to the office for Tran Huyen to review before reporting to the cabinet. Unsurprisingly, the entire plan received unanimous approval from the cabinet. In the temporary director's office, Lam Qian held a stack of top priority documents and handed them to Tran Huyen. Director, the cabinet has approved the plan. Our Mythic Anomalies Bureau is fully authorized to implement it. Tran Huyen nodded slightly and said in a low voice, "Time is of the essence. Prioritize the defense zone plan. Immediately convene a representative assembly of all sectors, especially the construction industry." "Do you intend to attend the assembly, Director?" Tran Huyen shook his head. "Not me. You go instead. It is not yet suitable for me to appear before the public. Furthermore, there is no need to reveal the truth to them yet to avoid causing panic. Just issue the orders directly from the central government. Conscription, the recall of overseas citizens, and the research and manufacture of heavy weaponry should also proceed simultaneously." Compared to arguing with those people, Tran Huyen preferred topping up and buying gift packs. Moreover, he knew his title as director was still quite green. There were many things he didn't understand. It was enough for him to hold the overall direction. The other details could be left to Lam Qianhyep and his team. "Understood. I may not stay at the base frequently in the coming days. I have prepared a secretary for you. If you have any needs, you can tell her directly. Chiudong, come in." As Lam Qianhyep finished speaking, he called out toward the door. A moment later, Lam Dong, dressed in a black and white suit that accentuated her perfect figure, pushed the door open and stepped inside. Seeing Lam Dong, the corner of Tran Huyen's mouth twitched slightly. The esteemed office director of the Thian High City government was going to be his secretary. At this moment, Tran Huyen still did not fully realize what his identity as the director of the Mythic Anomalies Bureau represented. If he understood well enough, he would know why Lam Dong had become his secretary. In this matter, it wasn't just Lam Dong's own desire. It was likely the desire of the entire Lam family. Chapter 8. Global Shockwaves. What is the Dragon Kingdom up to after all? The imperial capital. Before the Great Hall of the People. Leading figures from every walk of life, having received an emergency summons, had cast aside their schedules to rush here. To a man, they were drenched in sweat and gasping for breath, possessing neither the time nor the inclination to exchange greetings or pleasantries. Because the event had unfolded so abruptly, many media outlets had yet to receive word. By the time the press caught wind of it and converged on the site, the delegates had already filed into the hall. The entire perimeter of the Great Hall was now under a strict heavy guard, maintained by special police forces. The reporters who arrived in haste could do nothing but wait outside. Ladies and gentlemen, the nation has just convened an emergency delegate assembly. The contents of the discussion have not yet been disclosed. Please stay tuned as we bring you live updates as they happen. Reporters vied with one another to deliver their broadcasts, since it was during working hours. The sudden event initially drew little public attention. However, a significant number of foreign media outlets sensed something amiss and quickly reported back to their respective nations. Inside the hall, the delegates stared with deep suspicion at Lam Qianhyep, who stood tall and imposing upon the high rostrum. Even those who recognized him were left in a state of bewilderment. Why was a major general presiding over a political conference of this magnitude? Lam Qianhyep had no desire for long-winded introductions. He directly opened the top-secret red dossier No. 1 on the lectern and spoke in a low, resonant voice. "I hereby announce an emergency decree from the cabinet." The moment he spoke, the delegates sat up straight in unison, straining their ears to listen. The order is as follows. As of this moment, all currently implemented national policies are suspended. The entire country will concentrate its full strength on the execution of the defense zone plan. Taking provincial capitals as bases and following the model of small cities encircling large cities, 34 defense zones shall be established. All construction companies and mining enterprises must devote their full efforts to serving this plan. Silence. The Great Hall of the People grew so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The delegates stared wide-eyed and slack-jawed at Lam Qianhyep on the stage, as if they were looking at a ghost. Suspend all national policies? To have a nation of over 1 billion people pour its entire strength into a single task? They'd not known exactly where they were. they would have thought Lam Kien Hiep was a madman. The current domestic landscape was flourishing, having already become the world's second-largest economy. Once a total upheaval occurred, the ensuing consequences would be nothing short of cataclysmic. This is an order, unanimously approved by the entire cabinet. I expect all of you to cooperate fully with the state in the coming days. Having finished, Lam Kien Hiep stepped down from the rostrum and departed, leaving the vast crowd of delegates staring at one another in a daze. The moment the doors of the great hall swung open, the reporters waiting outside surged forward. Unfortunately, under the protection of the security detail, they were completely unable to reach the delegates and could only hold up their microphones from a distance, shouting questions. President Wang, can you reveal a bit about the meeting's contents? President Ma, faced with a barrage of questions, not a single person replied. Every delegate walked with hurried steps. Sharp-eyed reporters noticed that the faces of those belonging to the construction industry were alight with irrepressible joy. Could it be that the content of this meeting was related to construction? Many reporters speculated wildly, yet even in their wildest dreams, they could not have guessed the truth. My God, everyone, look at Weibo! Suddenly, a cry of astonishment broke out from the crowd. Hearing this, all the reporters pulled out their phones simultaneously. A trending search term titled, "What exactly is the Mythological Anomalies Bureau?" had rapidly climbed to the #1 spot. Scrolling down, the top 10 keywords were all related to the Bureau. The reporters clicked on the official Weibo page of the Mythological Anomalies Bureau and found that the account had just been registered and had only posted a single update. Yet, it was this very post that was about to send shockwaves through the entire Dragon Kingdom, and indeed, the entire world. As of this moment, all national policies are suspended. We shall concentrate all strength on the Defense Zone Plan. The Mythological Anomalies Bureau calls upon all construction workers of the Dragon Kingdom to respond to the national summons and participate in the Defense Zone Plan. As of this moment, mandatory military service is expanded to citizens aged 20 to 40, with a planned recruitment of 8 million additional troops, prioritizing veterans. The Mythological Anomalies Bureau calls upon all ambitious youth to answer the nation's call and actively enlist. The Mythological Anomalies Bureau calls upon overseas compatriots to return home. Before long, the Dragon Kingdom will seal its borders. At that time, those who have not returned will find no way back. The above decisions have been approved and unanimously passed by the entire cabinet, the director of the Mythological Anomalies Bureau, and the key leaders of the Dragon Kingdom, effective immediately. Immediately upon its release, the post was reshared by all mainstream media outlets, quickly drawing the attention of a massive number of netizens. Within a short time, views surpassed the 100 million mark, and comments broke through 1 million, continuing to skyrocket. Good heavens, what is happening? Is war coming? A 3-year veteran answering the call, "Where do I sign up?" At Mythological Anomalies Bureau. This comment caught the eye of the Bureau's network monitoring team, who immediately pinned it to the top and replied with a registration link. Instantly, the number of replies under that comment rose in a vertical line. 5-year veteran, answering the call. 2 years since discharge, answering the call. Furthermore, construction firms, mining companies, and cement factories, one after another, posted replies in support. The unity and power of mobilization displayed by the Dragon Kingdom at this moment left the foreign media outlets lurking behind their screens in utter shock. Simply seeing those uniform responses was enough to make one's blood boil. What shocked these foreign media outlets even more was that, despite the numerous curious comments, not a single person doubted the nation's decision. Had it been their own countries, there would likely have been countless people taking to the streets in protest, or even rioting. Simultaneously, the leaders of other nations, upon hearing the news, urgently convened meetings. Within the White House of the star-spangled nation, the white-haired leader was in a towering rage. Damn it, what is the Dragon Kingdom trying to do? Recruiting 8 million? Does the Dragon Kingdom want to start a world war? Investigate. Use every resource. We must find out the Dragon Kingdom's objective. Leaders of nations with friendly ties to the Dragon Kingdom also called the chief repeatedly to inquire for specific news. All they received was the answer that it could not be disclosed. In the spirit of friendship, the chief gave a subtle reminder. The world is about to face an unprecedented upheaval. My friend, prepare yourself early. This warning quickly reached the ears of other national leaders, but few paid it any mind. After all, not every nation or individual possessed the courage and mobilization power of the Dragon Kingdom. Many national officials were busy taking to Twitter to reassure their agitated citizens. The Star-Spangled Nation. Rest assured, no one understands the Dragon Kingdom better than I do. They are surely creating a smokescreen to cause global chaos. They have always been this sinister. Do not fall for their trap. The Cherry Blossom Nation. Rest easy. The idea of the Dragon Kingdom sealing its borders is pure nonsense. Such an action is no different from seeking one's own death. The Dragon Kingdom would never seal the country. The United States. We strongly condemn the Dragon Kingdom for inciting global panic. Our nation calls upon the Dragon Kingdom to abandon its recruitment efforts and prevent war. On social media, heated discussions exploded, and the entire world was shaken. Not only that, but in the real world, the major television stations of the Dragon Kingdom were continuous broadcasting the directives issued by the Mythological Anomalies Bureau during prime time. Chapter 9. United in strength, together against the turning tide. At a roadside eatery in Xianxia City, 7 middle-aged men with sun-bronzed skin sat huddled together, their faces etched with disappointment and weariness. Boss Hoa, still no projects? If this keeps up, the boys are going to start a riot. A small-scale contractor, his face a mask of misery, complained to the man leading the group. He's right, Boss Hoa. You have to find a way, the others chimed in. These men belonged to a private construction team led by Ho Lung. The crew consisted of several dozen workers and held a decent reputation in Xianxia. However, the pandemic's impact in recent years had forced many construction teams to struggle. A lack of projects had become a common occurrence. You think I don't want work? Ho Lung's face darkened as he spoke sharply. You know the situation as well as I do. I've gone everywhere, begging for work to no avail. What else am I supposed to do? To keep the team together, he had been paying subsidies out of his own pocket. If this continued, not only would his subordinates be left with nothing to eat, but he wouldn't be able to hold on himself. Welcome to tonight's news broadcast. At 4:20 p.m. today, the central government issued Red Document No. 1, to be implemented by the newly established Mythical Special Bureau. The contents of the document are as follows. 1. From this moment, just then, the television hanging in the shop erupted with a series of urgent announcements. Crash! The sound of chairs toppling over echoed through the air. Hoa Lung stood up abruptly, staring at the television with tear-rimmed eyes. The contractors beside him wore identical expressions. Brothers, our country needs us. How can we not answer the call? The nation calls, and the people respond. We cannot let our country down. Deeply moved, Hoa Lung swept his gaze over his brothers and shouted at the top of his lungs, "Drain your glasses. Tomorrow, notify every man under us. Everyone is going to sign up under me. Time to get to work." That night, countless construction workers wept for joy. The policy just announced by the state had practically pulled them back from the edge of the abyss. Otherwise, many would have had no choice but to change professions. But for ordinary construction workers like them, what else could they do besides manual labor, even if they changed careers? It wasn't just the construction workers. Veterans were also overcome with excitement and emotion. They never imagined that after being discharged, there would come a day when they could re-enlist. Though a soldier's life was arduous and full of hardship, the experiences within were enough to last a lifetime. Many often said that the military barracks was where a man truly belonged. Only a few hours had passed since the Mythical Special Bureau posted the announcement on social media. Yet the shockwaves it generated showed no signs of subsiding. On the contrary, the fervor only intensified because this time, Long Quoc was truly taking decisive action. Long Quoc embassies across the globe simultaneously issued announcements at exactly 7 p.m. Beijing time. The Long Quoc Embassy in the United States. All children of Huaxia, please return home as soon as possible. In 2 days, all embassy personnel will withdraw. The embassies in Japan, Britain, Russia, these announcements caused a global stir. Tonight, Long Quoc became the focus of the entire world. No one knew what this ancient and mysterious Eastern nation was planning to do. Suspending all national policies, mobilizing 8 million troops, closing embassies, and recalling overseas citizens. These policies felt like a dream. Could anyone with a shred of sanity enact such a mad plan? Was Long Quoc truly intending to return to the isolationist era of over a century ago? On social media, most foreign netizens were filled with mockery. Some Long Quoc students even declared outright on Twitter that they would never return, claiming they craved the atmosphere of freedom. Such statements further fueled the ridicule of foreign netizens, all of whom waited to watch Long Quoc become a laughingstock. God, look at what that Eastern silkworm is doing now. How foolish. Even their own people don't trust their country. I truly don't understand why so many people are responding. Shouldn't they be protesting right now? The people in that country are timid and weak. They simply don't have the courage to protest. At the Dongfeng base, in a vast conference room, Tran Huyen sat in the presiding seat with Lam Qianhip beside him. Below them sat hundreds of elites from various industries, filling the room to capacity. What is the status of public opinion online? Lam Qianhip tapped his finger on the table, directing his question to the network team. Public sentiment is high. The vast majority are responding to the national call. A few negative opinions were dealt with immediately. Overseas, the reaction is mostly disparaging, led by the United States. It's almost entirely negative information. Some financial giants even intend to take advantage of this to profit from our country. Among them, the most negative are the statements from certain Long Quoc students on Twitter, which have had a significant impact. The head of the network team, Diep Dung, stood up quickly to report, stealing occasional glances at Tran Huyen sitting at the head of the table. Everyone seated here was the elite of the elite, having signed non-disclosure agreements. They were essentially confined to the Dongfeng base for the next week. Regarding the mysterious and high-ranking young man, Tran Huyen, many maintained a necessary attitude of respect and wariness. As people who had navigated the world for years, they did not look down on Tran Huyen for his youth. Instead, they regarded him with even greater importance. To sit in that position at his age, the power behind him was easily imagined. Although they had been briefed on the Mythical Era, they still did not know Tran Huyen's specific identity. Currently, all information regarding Tran Huyen had completely vanished from the internet. Classified as Long Quoc's highest-level secret, and the state had even dispatched personnel to protect his family. There is no need to manage or persuade those with traitorous hearts. It is enough to take good care of the patriots. Facing everyone's gaze, Tran Huyen spoke calmly. For those who worshipped foreign air, it would be useless, even if they returned. Issuing a notice was already an act of national mercy. Whether they chose to return or not was up to them. The country did not have the leisure to coddle them. It was a pipe dream. How far along is the preparation for the construction of the 34 defense zones? Hearing Tran Huyen's question, the head of the construction team, Lam Thang, stood up and replied. Major construction companies, civilian teams, mining companies, cement plants, and steel mills, they have all actively responded to the call. Materials are currently being transported overnight to designated locations. Construction can begin tomorrow. Tran Huyen nodded slightly and instructed, fair compensation must absolutely be provided. They responded to the call out of trust in the nation. We cannot allow them to be disappointed. Understood. The meeting lasted for 2 hours. After reviewing everything, Tran Huyen stood up, looked toward the crowd, and said resonantly, Comrades, facing this unprecedented change. It is a peril, but it is also an opportunity. I believe that as long as we and the people of the entire nation are united in strength, this change will certainly not be a disaster for Long Kwok, but an opportunity to soar. As Tran Huyen's words fell, the young people in the meeting flushed with excitement, while the middle-aged and elderly felt their blood boil, feeling as though they had grown 10 years younger. A fortress of wills, together against the turning tide. Chapter 10. Gathering the nation's might, naught is impossible. Within the confines of his room, Tran Huyen waited for the feedback of power from his character class. He opened the interface, calculating the base attributes he was set to receive. During this period, his class level had risen to 57. Compared to the previous day, his corresponding base attributes had undergone an earth-shattering transformation. Name: Tran Huyen class, Chaos Swordmaster. Unique, level 57, strength 413D4. Includes a 1000 bonus from the Imperial Dragon Tyrant Physique talent, Physique 4972. Includes a 700-point bonus from the Imperial Dragon Tyrant Physique talent, Spirit 6168 equipment. True Martial Spirit Swords, Spirit Skills, Space System, Ancient Spirit's Sword / Ice System, Infinite Frostbound Domain, Lightning System, Divine Lightning Sharp Blade, Dark System, Abyssal Oblivion, Light System, Radiance of the 8 Directions. All skills have reached level 100. Skills may break through again once the player comprehends the corresponding laws. Class talents: Lucid Sword Heart, Chaos Sword Domain, Imperial Dragon Tyrant Physique, Molten Crimson Flame, Zodiac Nirvana. Note: the maximum strength, physique, and spirit of an ordinary person is 10 points. Looking at the figures on the interface, Tran Huyen could not help but let out a soft sigh. Perhaps due to his status as a transmigrator, his spirit attribute had exceeded the human limit from the very beginning, leading to it far outstripping his other stats. Fortunately, he had awakened the Imperial Dragon Tyrant Physique. As long as he continued to research and upgrade this talent, his strength and physique would scale alongside the advancement of the physique itself. The rule of attribute scaling after a class promotion was, for many, fundamentally unfair, as it grew based on the Awakener's initial baseline. With his original stats, Strength 6, Physique 8, and Spirit 12, he had been quite frail in terms of raw physical power. Those whose initial 3 attributes all reached the maximum would undoubtedly become powerhouses of immense combat strength within the same realm. After all, they had been leading the race from the very start. To change this disparity, one either had to awaken a talent like his Imperial Dragon Tyrant Physique, or pin their hopes on the heaven-defying treasures that might appear after the dawn of the Mythical Era. Rumble. As Tran Huyen was lost in thought, the feedback of power arrived right on schedule. A massive, surging torrent of warmth flooded his body, frantically remodeling his physical form. That vast and majestic power was enough to leave Tran Huyen intoxicated. 10 minutes later, in the real world, Tran Huyen's attributes had evolved. Strength 413.4, Physique 497.2, Spirit 6 and 16.8. Even his weakest attribute, Strength, was now 40 times that of an average human. He lightly clenched his fist. A sharp airburst crackled in the void, and the resulting gale sent the equipment in the room trembling incessantly. After briefly testing his new strength, Tran Huyen opened them all and checked the gift packs. Awakening Stone Gift Pack contains limited-grade awakening stones capable of early manifestation into reality. Can awaken 100 people. Purchase limit of 3. Price, 10 billion each. Bought, 30 billion vanished in an instant. Tran Huyen did not blink. His hand did not shake. He simply pressed the purchase button with total composure. Experience Pill Gift Pack contains 3 experience pills that grant 10 levels instantly. Limited to levels below 80. Excess experience becomes void after level 80. Price 300 million. Bought. When it came to his own class level, Tran Huyen did not hesitate for a second. What surprised him was that following the experience pill pack, the system refreshed to show a real-world manifestation experience pill pack. The price soared to 30 billion. containing 100 pills that granted 10 instant levels, limited to use below level 30. This pack, without question, had to be bought. In short, for the current Tran Huyen, there were only 3 words: buy, buy, buy. He finally understood the sheer joy of spending money without a care. No wonder wealthy socialites looked like they were loading trucks every time they went shopping. Aside from that one item, I'll take everything else. Just thinking the phrase was exhilarating. Tran Huyen. Oh, Tran Huyen, the mythical era is about to descend. How can your thoughts be so mundane? You must correct yourself. After a moment of self-reflection, Tran Huyen sent his level 80 character into the sycamore perilous realm to grind mobs, while he himself drifted into a deep sleep. The following day, at the construction site for the Tianhai City Defense Zone. Good morning, viewers. Welcome to our live broadcast from the scene of the Defense Zone construction site. I am your streamer, Man. A beautiful girl with a sweet face and a curvaceous figure smiled at the camera, her 2 small dimples deepening as she spoke to the phone screen. Goddess, seeing you right after waking up is wonderful. Man, move aside. Don't block my view of the site. In the live stream room, comments flooded the screen. Ever since the Weibo post by the Bureau of Mythical Anomalies yesterday, the heat surrounding the new major policies had not waned. The top 10 trending topics on Weibo were all related to the Bureau. No entertainment star or news story could compete. This had also led to major streamers flocking to the Defense Zone construction sites to livestream and catch the wave of popularity. Everyone, as we can see, in just one night, all kinds of construction machinery have been fully assembled. They are just waiting for the workers to arrive to break ground. This is the speed of our great dragon country, Man said proudly as she stood on the perimeter, panning her phone around the site. Dragon country speed, #1 under heaven. When it comes to infrastructure, no country on earth can compete. The comments surged, the burning passion palpable even through the screen. Look, the construction workers are entering the field. Let's go and get an interview. At that moment, dozens of people were approaching from a distance, catching Man's attention. She gave a quick word to her audience and ran toward them, her phone held high. The lively, bouncing camera feed caused the old wolves in the chat to howl in excitement. Hello, sir. May I interview you for a moment? Ho Lung looked at the adorable girl in front of him, a hint of hesitation on his face. It won't take much of your time, sir. Hearing this, Ho Lung nodded helplessly. All right, make it quick. We're about to start work. Seeing Ho Lung's lackluster expression, the live stream room grew rowdy again. Impossible. Is there actually someone not captivated by Man's beauty? His reluctance is written all over his face. With no women in the heart, laying bricks leads to godhood. Nothing can stop me from starting my shift. Having finally caught someone, Man didn't dare waste time. She asked hurriedly. Sir, did you pause your current job to answer the national call? After a brief silence, Ho Lung shook his head. Our construction crew had already been suspended for a long time before this. Was it because of the previous pandemic? Yes. Noticing that the expressions of Hoa Lung and the others had darkened slightly, Man quickly changed the subject. Are you confident in building this defense zone well, given such a massive workload that must be completed in such a short time? Do you think it's possible? Hearing this, Hoa Lung's expression turned solemn. He looked directly into Man's camera lens and said in a low, heavy voice, even if you don't believe in yourself, you must believe in the nation. When the strength of the entire country is gathered to do one thing, what could possibly fail? Having said his piece, Ho Lung didn't care for Man's reaction. He stated flatly, your interview time is up. We have to start work. The group of dozens of men brushed past Man and marched toward the construction site. Simultaneously, from all directions, numerous other construction teams, large and small, were entering the fray. At that moment, the sun began to crest the horizon. A brilliant crimson radiance bathed the entire site, as if a miracle were taking place. The sight was one the viewers of the live stream would never forget. Many years later, this photograph would resurface online, voted as the most beautiful scene captured before the dawn of the Mythical Era. Chapter 11. The Mythic Special Task for Dongfang Base. When Tran Huyen stepped into the office, the first image that met his eyes was Lam Dong's graceful figure. A cup of steaming hot coffee had already been set on the table, thin wisps of vapor curling into the air. Tran Huyen sat down, took a sip, and smiled. The sweetness is just right. Did you add extra milk? Are you truly starting to see me as your secretary? In response to Tran Huyen's teasing, Lam Dong offered a faint smile. Whether as a director or a secretary, I am still serving the Dragon Kingdom. In your position, perform your duty. As a director, I will do my absolute best. As a secretary, I will likewise carry out my mission to perfection. Hearing this, Tran Huyen nodded slightly, his expression turning serious. Last night, I purchased awakening stones that can manifest power into reality ahead of schedule. Notify Director Lam immediately. Tell him to mobilize the strongest special operations soldiers from across the country, limited to 300 people. I intend to have them awaken early, to form the Mythic Special Task Force. In addition, transfer another 10 billion into my card. Due to the limitations of the awakening stones, Tran Huyen could not directly choose individuals who already possessed powerful classes to form the team. He could only attempt to select those with the highest base attributes to undergo the awakening process. As for which class they would awaken, that depended entirely on each individual's luck. Understood. Lam Dong responded and immediately went to execute the orders. Upon receiving the command, Lam Kinyip did not dare to delay. He instantly notified the top-tier Special Forces units across the Dragon Kingdom, ordering them to drop all current missions and assemble at Dongfang Base with the utmost urgency. Less than an hour later, within the confines of Dongfang Base, armed helicopters touched down one after another, the roar of their engines echoing in all directions. Reporting. Dragon Soul Unit 30 men, all present. Awaiting inspection, sir. Reporting. Hidden Blade Unit, 30 men, all present, awaiting inspection, sir. Reporting. Thunderous shouts resonated across the training grounds. Each formation, clad in different uniforms, stood as straight as spears, awaiting instructions from Lam Kinyip. Every individual here was a true soldier king, and every unit was the trump card of their respective military regions. It was no exaggeration to say that if these 300 men appeared in an overseas nation simultaneously, the leaders of that country would certainly tremble in fear. Scanning the ranks, Lam Kinyip nodded in satisfaction and shouted loudly, "You must all be wondering why you have been summoned here. I am telling you now. Xianxia and the entire Blue Planet are facing an unprecedented upheaval. Our enemies are strong, extremely strong. And you are the chosen ones who will become the first warriors to face this foe. Answer me. Do you have the confidence?" As his voice fell, the 300 soldier kings shouted in unison, "Yes." Their heroic spirit, undaunted by danger, surged straight into the clouds. "Follow me, unit by unit. Mark time. March!" In a vast chamber deep within the base's basement, Tran Huyen and Lam Dong were already waiting. Aside from them, there were various types of machinery and equipment, along with a dozen research experts. They had come to measure the attributes of the special ops soldiers after their awakening. Furthermore, the awakened warriors were required to provide a small amount of blood so that the scientists could study the changes in their genetic code after obtaining a class. Before long, led by Lam Kinyip, the elite Special Forces units entered the hall. Every soldier looked straight ahead. Though their hearts were filled with curiosity, not a single one made a redundant movement. It was only when Lam Kinyip stepped forward to stand behind Tran Huyen that a flicker of astonishment crossed the faces of these elite soldiers. Tran Huyen looked even younger than they were, yet his status seemed even higher than that of Lam Kinyip, who already held the rank of Major General. A brief introduction. I am Tran Huyen, 27 years old, Director of the Mythic Extraordinary Bureau and Captain of the Mythic Special Task Force. From this moment forth, your names will be struck from your former units. You will become members of the Mythic Special Task Force, standing above all other military branches. Upon joining, you will be commissioned with the rank of Major. Similarly, you will become the vanguard of the Dragon Kingdom in the war against the Mythic. The level of danger far exceeds any mission you have ever undertaken. If anyone wishes to back out, you may leave immediately. No one moved. Every soldier stood ramrod straight, staring at Tran Huyen with unwavering eyes. Seeing this, Tran Huyen nodded in approval. With a wave of his hand, 3 massive monoliths, carved with strange, ancient patterns, appeared in the center of the hall. This feat of summoning objects from the void caused even these battle-hardened soldiers to contract their pupils in shock. Their powerful willpower helped them suppress their agitation, preventing any disorder. Everyone, form lines. Step up to the awakening stones one by one. Place your palms upon them, and focus your mind. Under Tran Huyen's command, the Special Ops soldiers began to undergo their class awakening. Seeing an awakening ceremony in real life for the first time, Tran Huyen felt quite curious himself. He fixed his gaze on the first soldier. Not only him, but Lam Qian Hiep, Lam Dong, the researchers, and the other soldiers also watched with bated breath. This soldier was extraordinary, a soldier king among soldier kings. It was Ha Bin Vo, captain of the Hidden Blade Unit. Ha Bin Vo pressed his thick, calloused palm against the awakening stone. Hum! In an instant, the mystical patterns on the stone seemed to be activated, glowing brilliantly in unison. A dreamlike, pale purple light flooded the entire hall. Ha Bin Vo's entire body was enveloped by the purple light, forming a massive cocoon. Except for Tran Huyen, the others could no longer see any trace of Ha Bin Vo. This strange spectacle was more than the soldiers could bear, and a wave of hushed exclamations broke out among them. At this moment, even Lam Qian Hiep lacked the presence of mind to reprimand them. Though he had witnessed many supernatural feats from Tran Huyen, he was still struck with profound shock. When a world that originally revered science suddenly manifested supernatural powers only found in novels, no one could remain calm. In contrast, Tran Huyen's eyes gleamed, and he could not help but let out a smile. He truly had not expected that the very first awakening would produce a legendary class. He truly lived up to his reputation as the captain of a top-tier special forces unit. One should not be misled by the fact that Tran Huyen possessed a full set of mythic-grade equipment. In reality, awakening a mythic class was harder than reaching the heavens. Even a legendary class could be called 1 in 100,000. For an ordinary person, awakening a high-tier class was already a great feat. A moment later, the light dissipated, and Ha Bin Vo stepped back, his face filled with excitement. The moment his class awakened, he could clearly feel that he had become stronger, at least several times stronger than before. What class did you awaken? Tran Huyen looked at Ha Bin Vo and asked. He could judge the grade of Ha Bin Vo's class through the color of the light pillar, but he could not directly see what specific class it was. Legendary Combat Type Class. Saint Battle Warrior. Possesses extremely high combat consciousness and a level of combat far exceeding ordinary people. Within the first 100 levels, I can awaken 3 major class skills. Ha Bin Vo did not dare to delay, standing at attention to report to Tran Huyen. After awakening his class, he could clearly sense the terrifying source of power hidden within Tran Huyen. In his eyes now, Tran Huyen was like a humanoid prehistoric beast, causing him to feel an instinctive shudder of fear. But strangely, he could not sense any class aura emanating from Tran Huyen's body. Very good. Go over there and cooperate with the researchers. Tran Huyen nodded in praise. He then turned his gaze toward the crowd of special ops soldiers and shouted in a deep voice, Next, Chapter 12. The 8 Directions, Sword Formation. My old man demands to enlist. The professional awakening ceremony lasted for a full 2 hours before finally concluding. To Tran Huyen's surprise and delight, 10 legendary professions had emerged among the 300 Special Forces soldiers, all of whom were captains of the major task forces. Rare professions numbered 108, while the remaining soldiers were primarily of the advanced tier. Furthermore, The majority of them had awakened combat-oriented roles, with only a small number in support roles. After a moment's thought, Tran Huyen understood the reason. These individuals were elite members of the Long Kingdom's top special forces units, carefully selected from major military regions, and tempered through life and death experiences on the battlefield. Regardless of strength, physique, or willpower, they far surpassed ordinary military personnel. While the high caliber of their awakened professions was slightly beyond expectations, it was entirely logical. Among them, the one Tran Huyen valued most was the captain of the Dragon Soul Special Task Force, Deep Van Dao. He had awakened a legendary grade hidden profession. Saint Array Master. Saint Array Master, a combat-oriented profession with an extremely high talent for comprehending formations. The speed of setting up arrays is many times faster than that of ordinary masters, and the power of the deployed formations is multiplied. For the current Long Kingdom, the importance of this profession was second only to Tran Huyen himself. After all, thanks to the arrays Deep Van Dao would establish, the safety of the 34 defense zones across the Long Kingdom would be significantly bolstered. Even if they could not stop high-level mutated beasts that might descend, the formations would at least buy Tran Huyen precious time to provide reinforcements. Director, I'll leave these people to you. I have other matters to attend to, Lam Qian Heap said to Tran Huyen, glancing at the soldiers surrounded by research experts not far away. Had the formation of the mythical special forces not held such immense symbolic importance, he would not have been able to spare the time to be here. Compared to the somewhat leisurely Tran Huyen, he was busy to the point of exhaustion. All manner of affairs required his constant oversight and attention. It's been hard on you, old lamb, Tran Huyen said, patting Lam Qian Heap on the shoulder to offer comfort. This display caused Lam Dong, who was standing nearby, to roll her eyes in silent contempt. After lunch, Tran Huyen received a report from the experts. Though the 300 Special Forces soldiers, who had awakened their professions, were only at level 1, their physical attributes had already doubled. The 10 legendary awakeners possessed strength and physique stats that had reached 20, while the others were all at 17 or above. Seeing these overall base stats left even Tran Huyen feeling a tinge of envy. At 2 in the afternoon, Tran Huyen summoned the Mythical Special Forces and brought out the experience pill gift bags he had purchased, distributing them to the awakened soldiers. Among them, each of the 10 legendary professionals received 3 pills, propelling them directly to level 30. The remaining 70 pills were distributed based on professional grade. The rest could only wait until the next day, when the gift bags refreshed. Once everyone had consumed the medicine and finished leveling up, Tran Huyen stood before the crowd and shouted powerfully, "Comrades, do you feel strong now?" "Strong!" Each Special Forces soldier roared, their faces flushed with excitement. It was no exaggeration to say that they could now easily crush their former selves. Compared to ordinary people, you are indeed strong. But against our enemies, you are still weak, so weak that you are no better than ants. Seeing the look of defiance on many faces, Tran Huyen continued unperturbed. As members of the Mythical Special Forces, you have earned the right to know the truth. In 5 days? No, precisely 4.5 days. The Mythical Era will descend upon Earth. When that time comes, the entire planet will be invaded by mutated beasts. Faced with creatures tens of meters long, or even hundreds or thousands of meters in size, do you still feel strong? A cold gasp filled the air. As Tran Huyen finished, the pupils of every Mythical Special Forces member contracted. Horror etched across their faces. Even as Galv battlefield veterans, hearing such a surreal and terrifying truth made it impossible to maintain their composure. I hope you will train yourselves even more rigorously. Do not let this sudden surge in strength make you arrogant. You are the vanguard against the mythical, the hope the nation has built for its people. I hope that after the Mythical Era begins, you can make the people understand that as long as the Mythical Special Forces exist, the Long Kingdom will remain safe and sound. Hearing Tran Huyen's words, many members took on a solemn expression and responded in a low, heavy voice, "Understood." Seeing this, Tran Huyen nodded slightly and signaled to Lam Dong. Lam Dong was prepared, leading a group of staff to distribute photo albums to each member. These albums had been created by researchers who borrowed Tran Huyen's phone to perfectly replicate the game's bestiary into a mutated beast encyclopedia. This is the Mutated Beast Encyclopedia. From now on, whether through memorization or any other means, you must burn the information within these pages into your minds. During the process, you may discuss among yourselves how you would kill these beasts if you encountered them. Without waiting for their reaction, Tran Huyen waved Deep Van Dao over. "Deep Van Dao, follow me." As the three of them left, the Special Forces group gathered together, flipping through the encyclopedia and engaging in heated discussions. Inside the office, the scholarly-looking Deep Van Dao stood tall, awaiting instructions. "You've reached level 30. Have you awakened any professional skills yet?" Tran Huyen got straight to the point. Reporting to the leader, "I have awakened one legendary skill, the 8 Directions Sword Formation. It is a sword path array of immense power." Tran Huyen's eyes gleamed. He instructed, "List the materials needed for the 8 Directions Sword Formation and give the list to logistics. As soon as they gather the materials, depart immediately for the 34 defense zones and set up a formation at each one. Time is of the essence." "Go now." "Yes, sir," a resonant reply echoed through the office. Deep Van Dao gave Tran Huyen a military salute and turned to leave. "There is a matter you might need to handle personally," Lam Dong said, stepping toward Tran Huyen with a peculiar expression. "What is it?" "Your father's is insisting on enlisting. He's even in a heated argument with the recruitment office staff. Since Tran Huyen had become the director of the Mythical Bureau, his parents had been under strict protection, but it was all handled in the shadows. Consequently, they were entirely unaware that their son was now a high-ranking leader of the Long Kingdom. This recruitment drive was intended for those under 40, and Tran Huyen's father, Tran Lu Quan, had long since passed that age. However, because of his fierce desire to serve and his status as a 10-year veteran, the recruitment staff found it difficult to refuse him outright and could only report the situation upward. After hearing the news, Lam Dong did not dare make a decision on her own and could only report it so Tran Huyen could deal with it himself. What? Chapter 13. This time, I fight in my father's stead. At this moment, Tran Huyen was truly dazed. His old man was nearly 50 years old and still wanted to enlist. What on earth was he thinking? Beside him, Lam Dong handed over a tablet displaying surveillance footage from a recruitment office. In the video, a middle-aged man dressed in dark green camouflage was rolling up his sleeves, arguing loudly with the staff members. "On what grounds are you refusing my enlistment? I'm only 46. I'm not old yet. I'm a 10-year veteran with more experience than any of these green recruits. Why can't I join? The treasured blade has not yet dulled, and my blood has not yet cooled. The nation is in need. If a veteran like me doesn't step up, who else has the right to?" Watching his father shout until he was red in the face, drawing a round of applause from the surrounding crowd, Tran Huyen's lips could not help but twitch. Why did the state impose age limits on service? First, the physical constitution of the youth allowed for better training and the ability to keep up with high-intensity combat. Second, even if major transformations occurred in the future, the potential for growth after awakening a profession would be far greater in the young. Of course, it could not be ruled out that some aged ginger might be spicier, awakening a super-tier profession. But such instances were bound to be extremely rare. The battlefields of the future were destined to belong to the youth of the Dragon Kingdom. As long as he was here, and as long as the soldiers of the Dragon Kingdom remained, they would never allow the generation of fathers to take to the front lines. Those elders had already endured enough. Now was their time to enjoy the fruits of peace. Unless every youth in the Dragon Kingdom had perished, why should their predecessors be forced to charge into the fray? Is this a common occurrence? Tran Huyen looked up and asked Lam Dong. Very common, extremely so. The passion of the people far exceeds our imagination. Practically every veteran of the older generation has reported to the recruitment offices to sign up. The strength displayed by the people of the Dragon Kingdom this time had shocked even the highest echelons of the government. In reality, many were deeply perplexed and curious about the nation's recent decisions, even feeling a sense of alarm and unease regarding the future of the country and themselves. Yet, when the nation called, they stepped forward without a moment's hesitation. Earlier, when the first chief learned of this, he had been moved to tears, exclaiming, "The heart of the people is a force to be reckoned with. When the entire nation is united as one like a wall of iron, what risk is there that we cannot overcome?" After a long silence, Tran Huyen gave his instructions. Tell the recruitment office to issue a formal notice explaining the situation clearly. Do not let our veterans feel slighted or aggrieved. As for my father, I will call him myself. Understood. Once Lam Dong left to attend to the task, Tran Huyen took out his phone and dialed Havadan, his phone number. "Hello? You brat? Have you found a wife yet?" Hearing the gruff voice through the phone, Tran Huyen's lips twitched again. It was the same old familiar style. "I heard you're planning to enlist. The nation has a need. How can a 10-year veteran like me refuse?" On the other end of the line, Tran Luquan grew silent for a moment before speaking with firm integrity. "Then you're a step too late. Your son has already enlisted ahead of you. If both of us head to the battlefield, who will look after Mom? This time, you stay at home and rest well. Take good care of her. Your son will fight in your stead," Tran Huyen said with a light chuckle. He knew his father's stubborn nature. Conventional persuasion would never work. Besides, saying he had enlisted wasn't exactly a lie. Was the director of the Mythological Anomalies Bureau not a soldier? Was the captain of the Mythological Task Force not a soldier? You brat! What kind of trouble are you stirring up? Get back here this instant." Tran Luquan's angry voice boomed, but the thick layer of worry within it was impossible to hide. "I should certainly obey my father's orders. But as a 10-year veteran, surely you know the nature of a deserter's shame?" Tran Huyen's calm words instantly silenced Tran Luquan on the other end. You must take care of yourself. Cooperate fully with the training. Training is bitter, but it is meant to ensure less blood is shed on the battlefield. Train as hard as you can. It's better than bleeding out there. You absolutely must. Listening to the rambling instructions on the phone, Tran Huyen felt a sudden warmth in his heart as he listened in silence. Across the Dragon Kingdom, how many people were currently just like his father, tirelessly advising their newly enlisted children? In the past, enlisting was seen as an honor, and few believed there would be any real danger. After all, it was a time of peace. Even if combat occurred in hidden corners unknown to the public, it was unlikely their own sons would be the ones sent to the front. But this time, given the massive movements within the Dragon Kingdom, one could guess with even the slightest bit of intuition that a true great war was likely on the horizon. Therefore, enlisting this time was no laughing matter. After a long while, Tran Huyen hung up and turned to Lam Dong, who was waiting nearby. "How many new recruits are participating in this drive?" "They are mostly discharged veterans." "Good. Tell them to expedite the training. Time is running out." "Understood." As if remembering something, Tran Huyen continued. "Those internal pests and the foreigners with ill intentions. It's time to sweep them out as well." Hearing this, Lam Dong smiled. Vice Director Lam has already begun implementing that. Ding dong. Suddenly, Lam Dong's phone chimed with a message notification. As she looked at it, her expression shifted instantly. "Director, we have a problem. A Dragon Kingdom student studying in the Star-Spangled Nation decided to return home after learning of the overseas recall. But he has been detained by the Star-Spangled authorities." Tran Huyen was slightly stunned. The Star-Spangled Nation detained a Dragon Kingdom student? On what grounds? The student's name is Than Fong. He is a globally recognized genius. At only 35 years old, he has already received the World Scientific Research Lifetime Achievement Award. He has achieved extraordinary feats in 4 fields: medicine, biology, physics, and nuclear energy. People once claimed he would remain in the Star-Spangled Nation, which caused our country to endure no small amount of ridicule at the time. Some high-ranking officials in the Star-Spangled Nation even considered him one of their own. Now that he has suddenly declared his intention to return, the Star-Spangled Nation likely cannot stomach the loss, which is why they've detained him, Lam Dong explained coldly. A bunch of arrogant thugs. Tran Huyen let out a cold laugh, his eyes flashing with a chilling light. He checked his phone. The internet was already in an uproar. After receiving orders from the higher-ups, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Dragon Kingdom had immediately held a press conference, issuing a harsh statement condemning the actions of the Star-Spangled Nation. We strongly condemn the hegemonic behavior of the Star-Spangled Nation. Our country calls upon the Star-Spangled Nation to release our detained citizen, Chu Tanfong. Otherwise, our nation will not hesitate to use all necessary measures to bring our citizen home. Do not say we did not warn you. The video of this press conference on Weibo had been liked and shared by countless citizens. Within a mere 10 minutes, it had climbed to the #1 spot on the trending searches. My great dragon kingdom has stood up, detaining our scientist? What on earth is the Star-Spangled Nation thinking? I hope the state remains firm to the very end this time. Not only that, but Twitter was also flooded with comments from foreigners. My God, this is truly ominous news. The Eastern Lion has awakened. Following the emergence of the Mythological Anomalies Bureau, the Dragon Kingdom once again commanded the world's attention. And this time, it was because the Star-Spangled Nation had detained a Dragon Kingdom scientist. Chapter 14. Not a single citizen of Long Kwok shall be permitted to come to harm the White House. Tindio Kwok. Damn it, what on earth is Long Kwok trying to do? A group of officials sat huddled together, their expressions shifting through a kaleidoscope of emotions with a distinct flicker of panic visible beneath their confusion. In truth, their reasons for placing Chu Tanfong under house arrest were twofold. First, they had no intention of allowing that eccentric genius to return to Long Kwok. After all, Long Kwok was already formidable enough. Second, it was a reaction to the massive movements Long Kwok had been making recently. Ever since that mysterious Mythological Anomalies Bureau had issued its first announcement, Long Kwok's sequence of actions had been relentless. They had begun by constructing 34 defense zones, followed by an aggressive spending spree to stockpile essential goods, the recall of overseas citizens, and the withdrawal of their embassies. More outrageous still, not long ago, they had even prepared to use force to expel foreign embassies and their citizens. Currently, the embassy of Tindio Kwok had been ordered to vacate within 2 days, and the perimeter was under the strict surveillance of Long Kwok soldiers. Initially, they had assumed Long Kwok was merely posturing. They never expected that Long Kwok would actually follow through. While many Western nations were doing their utmost to smear this ancient Eastern power, once that dragon truly began to stir, who among them was not terrified? Among them, Tindio Kwok was the most anxious. They were desperate to know exactly what Long Kwok was plotting. This feeling of being kept in the dark was driving them to the brink of insanity. Accustomed to being in control of everything, they found this situation utterly intolerable. Grand Commander, a Long Kwok carrier fleet has just been deployed. At that moment, a beautiful, blonde, blue-eyed secretary rushed into the meeting room, lowering her voice as she spoke to the silver-haired Grand Commander of Tindio Kwok. Damn it. No, that's impossible. After a string of curses, the Grand Commander and several high-ranking officials hurried toward the command center. Simultaneously, at the Dongfeng base, Tran Huyen received a call from the cabinet leader. Comrade Tran Huyen, how are the recent operations of the Mythological Anomalies Bureau proceeding? Reporting to the leader, the entire nation is united as one. Everything is proceeding in an orderly fashion. Tran Huyen stood tall, holding the phone as he spoke with gravity. It has been hard on you, having to shoulder such immense pressure. Hearing those words, a surge of emotion rose within Tran Huyen. He replied quickly, "You are the one who works harder. Please have faith. No matter how many hardships our Long Quoc has faced, we have always overcome them. This time will be no exception. I believe you." "Of course I do," the leader replied warmly before continuing regarding Comrade Tu Thon Fong. "I assume you have heard the rumors. I have just been informed of the situation. Not a single citizen of Long Quoc shall be permitted to come to harm." The leader's voice grew solemn. "Unless it is absolutely necessary. Long Quoc truly does not wish to provoke a war at such a sensitive time. Our primary enemy is not another nation, but the mythological era itself. However, if the situation truly becomes unsalvageable, I would like to ask you to step in and bring the scientist Tu Than Fong home." Tran Huyen's expression shifted slightly at the request. He said hurriedly, "I would not dare claim such credit. As the director of the Mythological Anomalies Bureau, serving the people is my highest mandate. If the people have need of us, the Mythological Anomalies Bureau will never hesitate." On the other end of the line, the leader let out a soft laugh. "If everyone possessed your level of awareness, Comrade Tran Huyen, what reason would Long Quoc have to fear the mythological era? Very well, I will leave you to your work. If the need arises, I will have someone notify you." "Understood." The Mythological Anomalies Bureau stands ready at all times. After hanging up, Tran Huyen turned to Lam Dong, who was standing beside him. "Keep a close watch on the detention situation." "Understood." Once the moment of professional gravity passed, Tran Huyen looked at the refined and beautiful Lam Dong and teased, "If none of this had happened, you'd probably be sitting in your office sipping tea right now, while I'd be trying to pitch a house to some middle-aged, balding man in a suit." Lam Dong, who had been maintaining a stern facade, couldn't help but burst into a small laugh. She countered, "How can you be so sure he'd be middle-aged and bald? Most of the clients I met before were exactly that type." As she gazed at Tran Huyen's handsome, clean-cut face, Lam Dong's heart couldn't help but flutter. She had harbored a slight fondness for Tran Huyen since the day she bought the house. She was, after all, an ordinary woman with an appreciation for beauty, though she hadn't entertained any real intentions back then. Even though she was over 30, unmarried, and had never had a boyfriend, her status did not permit her to be like other women, to boldly pursue someone just because she liked them. Had these events not unfolded, her ultimate fate would likely have been to follow her family's wishes, finding a stranger of equal social standing to spend her life with. Many envied those born at the finish line, yet they did not know that those at the finish line often envied those who could spend their lives with the ones they loved. That initial spark of attraction, compounded by this series of world-altering events, made Lam Dong feel a sudden, daring urge to claim the man before her. However, she understood deeply that given Tran Huyen's current status, he was likely beyond her reach. Furthermore, the impending crisis left no room for the distractions of romance. Even so, she wanted to be bold just once. Even if she failed, she wouldn't have to live with the regret when she looked back on her life. Tran Huyen was momentarily dazed. The soft, cool sensation against his temples, combined with a faint, lingering fragrance wafting into his nose, caused his entire body to stiffen. This woman, what did she mean by this? "You must be exhausted, aren't you? Everything is resting on your shoulders. For a long time to come, the protection of Long Quoc depends entirely on you. You are carrying the fate of all Long Quoc on your back right now." Her voice was filled with such tenderness that the stray thoughts in Tran Huyen's mind vanished, and he fell silent. Possessing a cheat was something ordinary people dreamed of. But when that advantage came coupled with terms like mythological invasion and the survival of the planet, only those who truly lived it could feel the suffocating weight of the pressure. Whether in his past life or this one, Tran Huyen was ultimately just an ordinary man. To suddenly accept such a monumental responsibility, how could anyone adapt to that instantly? His subordinates might not fully grasp it, but Lam Dong, who was always by his side, understood his burden perfectly. He might appear relaxed on the surface, seemingly doing nothing but purchasing gift packs in a game. But the psychological strain he endured was far beyond common imagination. For now, the various operations of Long Kwok were still supported by the citizenry and the vast ranks of the leadership. But once the mythological era truly descended, who would be left to share the burden with Tran Huyen? Before the mythological task force and the people of Long Kwok awakened their professions, Tran Huyen was destined to fight alone. The only thing the nation could provide was remote assistance. Neither I nor Long Kwok have any other choice. After a long silence, Tran Huyen spoke in a low voice. Yes, there is no other choice. For the people of Long Kwok and for this country. After responding, Lam Dong stood behind Tran Huyen. Her expression fluctuated before settling into a firm resolve. She spoke with determination. If there is a next time, I want to awaken. I might not be able to help you for a long time, but I will work hard for that goal. Perhaps feeling that her words were too suggestive, Lam Dong quickly added a teasing note. How could the secretary of the illustrious director of the Mythological Anomalies Bureau be just an ordinary person?